Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nenad.
And we've got a great show for you guys today. It is the recap of Super Bowl 55. Tom Brady, the ageless wonder, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers completely annihilate the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers get their second Super Bowl championship in their franchise. Tom Brady gets his seventh, and he now has more championships himself than any team in NFL history, Nick. No words to describe him other than he is the true GOAT. And I know we've gone over this, but you now have no ammo to say he is anything but the GOAT from now on. So, of course, we are going to get into all this talk, dissect the entire game, why the Bucs were so dominant, why the Chiefs were not able to capitalize at anything in the game. They completely stunk the bed. And a little later on in the show, we will get into some other NFL news with the Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford trade that happened last week, but we have not really discussed that. So we'll get into that a little bit, as well as rumors of Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles relationship that has grown very sour, a potential trade for Carson Wentz looming. And then a little baseball talk. We've got spring training just 10 days away. Yeah. Nick's got his Dodgers hat there, and his Dodgers got a huge pickup. A Cy Young winner is now added to the rotation, so we will get into that a little bit later on the show. But Nick, we've got to start with the Super Bowl. Like I mentioned, Tom Brady wins his seventh championship, the most ever by a player, an NFL player, and in the NFL history. So just give me your initial reactions of the game and how the Bucs were able to be so dominant.
Well, I'll give a disclaimer really quickly before we start the podcast. I believe either they're doing construction or somebody is moving into the apartment next to me. So it's been extremely loud for the last hour. So if you guys hear something going on in the background, that's what that is. It hasn't happened in the last 10 minutes. But I wanted, it's not me or something going on in my apartment. I don't have a pack of 8 people doing construction in my apartment and then decided to record a podcast. I did not know that was happening, but just disclaimer if anything's loud. Yeah, I mean, it starts with a trend, Jared, of me always drinking a lot during the Super Bowl and having to do about 3 or 4 recap sessions of the game after the night and then this morning and after.
There's no other way to do it.
Yeah. So I really, unlike a lot of other games, I've watched this game a bunch. Not the full game, but the highlights and all that stuff. And, it came to the same conclusion every single time. I'm amazed the Chiefs did not score a touchdown. There are reasons, which I will get into in a second, why they didn't win. There's clear reasons, clearer than a lot of other games. But just the fact that Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, Sammy Watkins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire were not able to get the ball across the goal line is one of the most amazing things, or one of the most unbelievable things you could tell me before the season started, that there would be a game where the Chiefs wouldn't score a touchdown, let alone the Super Bowl. So I'm kind of sitting here still a little bit astounded at that happening. But, there were reasons why the Chiefs lost. Drops. There were some big-time drops, one in the end zone by Tyreek Hill, one by Travis Kelce. It was like a 30-yard pass, another one of those crazy Mahomes throws, which we'll get into in a second. And then later on in that game, a lot of those insane throws off almost on the ground where Mahomes was throwing it up one-on-one and the guys were not able to make catches. Great on the defense for the Bucs, but that was the first thing that I kind of remembered from the game. Just not really, I don't have stats on that, but just watching the highlights, I kept being like, oh, that could have been there, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of those drops were in big-time parts of the game. The pressures. It's been the one thing probably everybody's been talking about. The Chiefs line blew up this game. And it was probably due to injuries. But, it shows you that any great quarterback, any great running back, any great receiver, any great head coach can't do anything without offensive line. And we've seen this with Deshaun Watson, the Houston Texans. We've seen this with other quarterbacks in the past. This was just not good at all from the Chiefs offensive line. 38 pressures from the Bucs, only 5 from the Chiefs on Tom Brady. Does that have to do with the Buccaneers game plan? probably a little bit too, and I'll get into that in a second. And then when you look at the penalties, 11 penalties for 120 yards, some of those being giant penalties that continued drives for the Buccaneers. One of them was it moved the punt back that ended up going to like the 35-yard line after the Kelsey miss. So those were the three things initially that I looked at and why the Chiefs didn't score and why they didn't win. And then when you look at the Buccaneers, they got Tom Brady. They scored the 31, 32 points I thought they would. That's not a surprise. And they did what they were supposed to. No turnovers from Tom Brady. They rushed the ball for, I believe it was 145 yards yesterday. 145 yards with only 2 running backs. And Brady spread the ball around to at least 6 players for every single playoff game this year, including the Super Bowl. So those are my just initial thoughts on what happened and why this game ended up being. But Jared, can you explain to me still how like they didn't score a touchdown? Because they don't even saying that. It's like they still should have scored a touchdown, though.
I can't. You could have said like Saturday, the day before the game, Sunday morning, leading up hours before, you could have said, I'll bet you $500. I'll bet you $1,000 that the Chiefs won't score a touchdown, and I would have taken that bet 1,000 out of 1,000 times. Like this is the Chiefs that you're talking about, and you just mentioned the list of names, right? Patrick Mahomes, obviously Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then you've got the coaching staff of Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. I mean, that on paper, they just come out of the tunnel and they score 30 points, right? And so I think it is a mix of this Kansas City Chiefs offense that was just not in sync and not clicking. And I think we do have to give a lot of credit to this Bucs D and defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, right? They obviously got whooped in the first matchup in the regular season when the Chiefs traveled to Tampa Bay, and that was the game where Tyreek Hill went off in the first half for over 200 receiving yards, right? And it looked like it was going to be a blowout. The Buccaneers ended up coming back and making it close. I believe it was 27-24. So that game ended up being a little bit closer, obviously, than the Super Bowl matchup. But the adjustments, I think, right? It's so difficult to beat a team twice in a year. And obviously, every year you play your in-division opponent twice, one home, one and away. And so when you're playing a non-divisional opponent, I think it's even more difficult to beat a team and sweep a team twice in one season. So I think we just have to give a lot of credit to the Bucs defense, more so than the offense, because I think you and I both can agree when we were making our predictions last week that we said, the Bucs are going to be able to score as well. And if I'm not mistaken, Nick, it was you who was saying whoever has the ball last is more than likely going to win. Right. So that was the scenario that I think you and I were kind of going off of. And it was just the Bucs were able to capitalize early and their defense literally for 60 minutes. Like they did not take a play off. Patrick Mahomes literally running for his life. One of the craziest stats that you will ever hear. Patrick Mahomes ran for 497 yards before he threw the football.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm going to say that again. I'm going to say that again. I was watching NFL Live today, and one of their statisticians brought it up. So I'm not taking credit for that, but it's just such an amazing stat.
That is amazing.
From the time that the ball was snapped, right, to before Patrick Mahomes threw the ball, he ran for a total of 497 yards. That is almost 5 football fields. Like he was literally running for his life, also on a messed up toe that he's potentially going to be having surgery on as soon as this week. So I'm never one to put injuries out there. If you suit up and you play, then you are good enough to play. But obviously, Patrick Mahomes was dealing with an injured foot and wasn't 100%. But it's just it's amazing to see that he was running around and scrambling to try to make plays, and he was able to at least get the ball into a position where his receivers can make a play. And, like you mentioned, just drops. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill both had drops, and those guys are sure-handed pass catchers. So it was very uncharacteristic to see those types of mistakes from the Chiefs. I don't know, man. I'm in shock that the Chiefs did not score a touchdown, right? The 31 points by the Buccaneers, I could totally see that all day long. The 9 points from the Chiefs, it just doesn't sit right to me.
Well, remember, I was saying this was the first thing I had written down in my notes last week. I have them up this week just to see how everything went. And I said Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have never lost by more than 8 points. And they lost by 22 in the Super Bowl. 22.
So it's your fault. So you jinxed them.
I don't care if it's. I mean, it's. I'm just saying this is how amazing this is. When I look at it too, when you look at the stats more as well, they did get a little. They got too star heavy. They only gave the ball to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Le'Veon Bell wasn't used. Why? I have no idea. I know Le'Veon Bell's a star, but he really wasn't featured in this game as much. Besides Hill and Kelsey, who both got involved relatively later in this game, in the second quarter and third quarter. Because I think, what was it? At halftime, Hill had 2 receptions, 13 yards. Not bad, right? Yeah.
Not bad if you're like the 5th or the 6th receiver on the depth chart.
Like Mecole Hardman. Pringle. That's not bad. But so, going to that fact, besides Hill and Kelsey, who combined for 17 receptions and over 200 yards in the game, Watkins, 1 reception, 13 yards. Demarcus Robinson, 1 reception. Darrell Williams, out of the backfield, 2 receptions. Mecole Hardman, 2. Byron Pringle, 1. Edwards-Helaire, 2. They're not spreading the ball around to anybody. It's just, let's just try to get it to Hill. Let's force it to Kelsey. And then we saw Hill and Kelsey not be able to make the big plays. And that's what I'm saying? So they didn't spread the ball around in the running game. They didn't spread the ball around receiving. Yes, probably a lot of that had to do with the pressure. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to the Bucs defense, like you did as well. But still, I would have thought that the Andy Reid game plan would have been a little smarter than this. I really think when you look at like Tampa Bay, they had Mike Evans firing. They had Antonio Brown playing well. They had Rob Gronkowski turn into like the Rob Gronkowski of 5 or 6 years ago. They got a lot of guys going as well. In the passing game, they ran 2 running backs that both had over 60 yards in the game. You look at this, and the Chiefs tried to get it to a couple guys, and the Buccaneers didn't care who they were throwing to. And they said, here's a play for you, here's a play for you, here's a play, to keep the defense guessing. There's no guessing when, okay, they're going to give it to the small guy out of LSU. Let's just hit the hell out of him and tackle him. Okay, they're going to go for Hill. Let's just double team him. Kelsey, whatever. We can give it up to him. One receiver can do well, right? It's Patrick Mahomes. And that's what happened, right? Sammy Watkins, I know he wasn't healthy, but he needed to do more in this game. Mecole Hardman, great game last week. Where the hell was he? So it's just, I don't know. It's not like the Buccaneers defense was that good that they were able to stop everybody. I think there's some call on the game plan here as well. What do you think about that? That I'm troubled that Andy Reid didn't really come up with anything. There was no adjustments. I know about the pressure, but where were the adjustments in this game?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think more adjustments as the game goes on. I think the Chiefs came in with a decent game plan, but they just didn't execute from the very beginning. The Chiefs offensive line was not able to block, and Travis Kelce, amongst others, dropped major passes. I forget if it was late in the first quarter or the second quarter, and I believe you brought it up. You just didn't really elaborate on it. That long, it was like a 3rd and 14 or something like that. Mahomes is able to escape and find Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce literally just drops it. I mean, it was right into his mitts. Like it wasn't like an acrobatic catch. You didn't have to do some one-handed thing. It was right here in his numbers, and he just simply dropped it. And you just don't see that happen.
What happened after that was they had a punt. A penalty knocked the punter back into the end zone. Yep. They punted again. The punter kicked it to like 35-yard line, and the Buccaneers just went down the field.
It was such a momentum swing for a couple reasons. Because one, if the Chiefs convert that, right? Let's say that Travis Kelce actually makes that catch. Irregardless of if they score and get a field goal or a touchdown, they flip field position. You're right. The fact that they had to punt and then they get a penalty and they have to back up even further, the Buccaneers started with great field position. They were already up 7-3. They were able to drive down, score a touchdown, and make it 14-3, and that just put even more pressure on the Chiefs, right? We mentioned it last week. You and I both did. The Chiefs didn't seem to really, get down on themselves when they were losing. We've seen it in this playoffs as well as last year's playoffs. The Chiefs were down by double digits in multiple games, right? They never panicked. They were just like, all right, let's go out and we're going to have to come back and score because they have the weapons to do so. And it seemed like in this game, you're right. That's where I don't think the adjustments were necessarily made. It wasn't really the game plan and how they came in. But once you're down by 14, once you're down by 17, and you get down by 20 and more, yes, your game plan does have to change. And I think that's exactly why the Chiefs only ran it a total of 17 times, was because they had to throw the ball. And when you have the likes of a Patrick Mahomes, a Super Bowl win champion, a Super Bowl MVP and a league MVP, it's like, okay, we're going to put the ball in your hands, right? We're not going to rely on the running game anymore because we know how special you are. It's just that, like I said, the Bucs defense was that great. One last thing before I give it back to you. This Bucs defense literally reminded me of the 2007 Giants, who went up against Tom Brady and the Patriots and stunned and shocked the world. You want to know what that Giants defense did to Tom Brady? They rushed with 4 and they dropped 7 in coverage. That is literally exactly what the Buccaneers did yesterday to Patrick Mahomes. They were able to rush and get home with 4, and they were able to put 7 defenders in the secondary to cover the litany of receivers that the Chiefs had. So because the Bucs didn't have to blitz a whole lot, even though they did, they blitzed their corners and they were able to confuse the Chiefs offensive line. But for the most part, they were able to sit back and rush with 4. Now, it's very tough to do, right? And from a week in, week out situation, it's very tough. That's why you have to come up with different schemes and ways to blitz to get creative. But when you don't have to do that, when you can just sit back and let your talent do its thing with your front 4 linemen, that makes it so much easier on a defense because you have 1 or 2 extra defenders. And that's why Patrick Mahomes was running for his life so much, because even when he was able to elude a defender, he was still like, wait a minute, there should be a guy open right now. Like, I've been scrambling for 5 seconds. As a cornerback, it is very tough to guard a receiver for more than 5 seconds. Like, usually at some point, whether it's a receiver or a tight end or someone's going to get open. And when Patrick Mahomes was eluding those rushes, he was looking downfield like, wait a minute, someone should be open by now, and no one was open. So, I mean, like I said, all the credit in the world to the Bucs defense because they were able to rush without blitzing, and that just gave them more credit in the back end.
Yeah, and you know, again, there was a lot of reasons this game ended up going the way it is. I do want to get back a little bit, at least on my part, to that moment where we just talked about the moment of momentum when the Chiefs, Kelsey misses a ball, the punter, there's the penalty, the punter kicks it to the 38. On that next drive as well, you know, Tom Brady threw an incomplete pass that was actually intercepted by Tyrann Mathieu,
Ooh,
and there ended up being a holding penalty on 3rd down. So the penalties kept hurting. They end up getting that. So it gets better, Jared. It gets better. Same drive. 1st down again. 1st and 10, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 5, passing complete. 4th and 5, field goal attempt is good, except there's a guy lines up offsides, and next play score a touchdown.
Whoops.
Chiefs go on to kick a field goal. They don't score a touchdown. The big long drive that was over 12 plays long. The next drive, there's a minute left in the game. We have Brady with the ball. It's only 14-6. It's a 1-possession game.
Minute left in the half.
Yeah. You know, on a 1st and 10 in their own territory, Brady throws the ball deep to Mike Evans, and he gets tripped up by Breeland. And they just move the ball all the way down to the 24. There's just all these different, like, all these penalties kept racking up. Then you have Tyrann Mathieu pass interference in the end zone. So just from that one Kelsey miss, this is how everything in a big game like this, when you're playing Tom Brady, can affect you. You have to play mistake-free football. And I think this goes back to also, you remember, Jared, about a month ago, or with a month left in the season, I was mentioning that I thought the Chiefs were getting a little lazy, right? So what happened in the Super Bowl? They got lazy. They only gave it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're like, Mahomes, run around for 500 yards and throw the ball to just throw it up, right? Someone will catch it. We're talented enough, and it didn't end up working. So I think if you're the Chiefs, you need to look at this and be like, it doesn't matter how talented we are. It doesn't matter if we have the future GOAT. It doesn't matter if we have Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, the best tight end ever play the game. We can still get our ass kicked in the Super Bowl. And I think they need to look at it. And when they come into these playoff games, and they come into the Super Bowl, and they come in these big games, you cannot just rely on your stars. It has to be a team effort. The defense didn't do a good job. Team-wise, penalty-wise, they didn't play well. The offensive line was awful. Injuries, whatever. They should be talented enough to just block some guys, right? And then, you know, the stars didn't come up with big plays either. Tyreek Hill with a big drop in the end zone, and Travis Kelce with a big drop, you know, over the middle. So I just think it goes back to the Chiefs got a little ahead of themselves maybe, didn't play the way they should have, and it was one of the reasons they ended up losing this game. What are
Yeah,
your
so
thoughts? So what are your thoughts on just the overall Chiefs season too? Like, where do they go from here? We can transition into that for our Super Bowl analysis. Where do you look at the Chiefs now going into the offseason?
Well, listen, the Chiefs obviously are still loaded with talent, right? They've secured Patrick Mahomes. They signed him to a long-term contract now this last offseason. So, that's in the book. They're going to eventually have to figure out, can they still pay the likes of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, right? I'm not exactly sure where they are in their contracts, but I can guarantee you in the next year or two, whether the contracts are up or not, they're going to want an extension. So you can only pay so many guys. That's the reason why there's a salary cap, so that the playing field is level. So I think that is something that we'll have to keep our eye on is, will this team be able to stay together from a talent perspective, or are they going to have to make the hard decisions in the next coming years to let some stars potentially go because they just simply can't afford to pay them? That's one of the things I'm looking forward to. The other thing, and I think it was clear as day, was the offensive line. Now, they were missing their two tackles, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. Mitchell Schwartz had been out for most of the year with a back injury, and Eric Fisher, unfortunately, tore his Achilles in the AFC Championship game against the Bills. So, you're coming into a matchup where you're already down one starter, and then you have to basically scramble, and in a week, you were down two starters. So you're almost playing with your second-string offensive line. Not only did the Eric Fisher injury kind of, just hurt that one position, it actually affected three other positions because the Chiefs had to move like a guard to center, and then they moved another position. So there were three offensive linemen that were playing out of position for the Chiefs. And when you're going up against the Bucs, one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, that's a recipe for disaster right there. So I would say coming into this draft, even though they're going to have the 31st pick, which is not going to be a, top, there's no guarantee you're going to get a bona fide star. You're definitely not going to get one of the top offensive tackles. I think they need to look at their offensive line situation and potentially in free agency, bring in some guys to kind of shore up that depth. I heard on the broadcast yesterday that the Chiefs are top heavy. So the Chiefs maybe have more talent at their star levels, but the Bucs had the better depth. They actually had the better overall team. So for as good as the Chiefs are, I think they need to get better at their depth at certain positions because obviously we know how physical this game is, and we know the injuries that are associated with this. So going through a 16-game season plus 3 playoff games and then getting into the Super Bowl, you're going to have multiple injuries. You're going to need other guys to step up and play. And especially in a COVID year, it was enhanced even more. So those are just a few of the things that I'm looking at. This Chiefs team, as long as Patrick Mahomes is healthy, they're going to be in contention, right? Like, I'm not guaranteeing, obviously, that Mahomes will win another Super Bowl, but I would almost bet that he's going to have a chance to get back to multiple Super Bowls. So I believe Tom Brady owns the record as well as appearing in 10 Super Bowls. I can see Patrick Mahomes getting close to that, like appearing in 6, 7, 8,
it's already 2.
And who knows after that, right? He's already got 2, and he's just finished his 3rd year in the league. So those are probably the things I'm looking at for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and so I'll go a little more in depth on this. The Chiefs have $100 million right now invested in Patrick Mahomes, Frank Clark, Chris Jones, and Travis Kelce until at least 2024. Okay, it's $100 million, almost on the dot. Okay, that's at least average salary-wise, right? Some of the salary figures might be a little different in each year, but it's around that number. When you look at after those 4, because those are the 4 biggest contracts, Tyreek Hill, Eric Fisher, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, he's one of their star guards, Tyrann Mathieu, and Mitchell Schwartz. So that's 3 offensive linemen, arguably their best defender, and an inside linebacker, as well as their wide receiver, Tyreek Hill. The reason I say those is those are the next 6 big contracts. They're expiring in 2023 and 2022. So coming up relatively the next 2 years, those contracts are all gone. So Chiefs really need to determine out of these kind of guys, who can you keep? Can you get guys maybe to take pay cuts and stuff like that? I don't think they will have the 10 guys I just mentioned, the guys that have the long-term contracts and the guys that have the short-term contracts right now, they will not have those guys. So they need to pick smartly on who they want to keep. And so the next few off seasons are going to be big for the Chiefs as far as extensions and being smart and drafting, like you mentioned. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But the Chiefs are relatively okay. Like you said, they still have Mahomes. They still have the two anchors on the defensive line, right? Jones and Clark. And they have Travis Kelce, who will always help that team. And then if you can maybe keep Tyreek Hill, keep two of those linemen, Tyrann Mathieu, right? Like, you're pretty good. But if they lose some of those guys, that's where you see it being a little bit tougher to repeat and get into Super Bowls and stuff like that. And I think that's why they really need to hunker down and not be lazy, because that's what I noticed. And it only happens with really, really good teams. But for some reason, a guy named Tom Brady never gets lazy and just keeps on going at it. And he's batting 700 in the Super Bowl. Craziness. So let's get to Tom. Yeah, go ahead.
No,
go
listen, I actually want to get to Tom Brady, but I also want to get to the Honey Badger and Tyrann Mathieu, because this was an in-game situation that we had some jawing back and forth. And then after the game, we had the Super Bowl champ, Tom Brady, actually reportedly texting Tyrann Mathieu and apologizing for whatever beef they got into during the game. So I want to get your thoughts on it, Nick, but for me, it's really simple. You don't poke the bear. And Tyrann Mathieu, I don't care what he said. I don't care if he said, Tom Brady, you're not winning today. I don't care if he said, Tom Brady, you suck. I don't care if he said something about his mama. Whatever he said, it triggered Tom Brady. And from that point on, it seemed like Tom Brady was going directly after Tyrann Mathieu, because you mentioned it in our initial analysis. Tyrann Mathieu got called for that holding penalty in the end zone. Tom Brady was specifically targeting him. So I want to get your opinion on that, because I think that as if Tom Brady needed any more motivation going into this game, he was already fired up enough. And then you get the chirping from Tyrann Mathieu, and Tom Brady just says, okay, that's fine. I'm going to throw 2 tugs to my guy Gronk. I'm going to throw another tug to Antonio Brown, and we're going to take the championship home.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's better than the GOAT, right? That's why he's the GOAT. So if you're going to poke the bear, or in this case, the Buccaneer, right in the stomach, he's going to go after you. I absolutely think it had something to do with why the Buccaneers were successful. You get a guy like Tyrann Mathieu that's had his troubles in the past, with just troubles in the past in general, with in college and with teammates. You can get that kind of guy riled up. Tom Brady went after him. Whatever was said, Mathieu went a little too far, and Brady said, "Well, you know what? I'm smarter than you. I'm better than you. You were just a safety. I am the best quarterback to ever play the game. Let's go." And Jared, as you know, maybe the viewers don't know, I've had my own personal stuff with Tyrann Mathieu personally that I'm not going to comment on, but I know the guy can get chirpy and can talk trash and go a little bit too far. Let's just say that. So I'm not surprised it happened, and I was kind of happy, Jared, to see it happen, because you love to see that one-on-one, that one guy going after the other. We always remember Richard Sherman right after the game, and even Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tyreek Hill later in the game. Winfield Jr. getting that penalty, which was complete BS. So Hill can do backflips in the end zone. Yeah, so Hill can do backflips in the end zone and do all this crazy stuff during the game all season, and one safety gets in his face and puts up the peace sign and gets a penalty for it. It seems like bias to me, right? I'm sure, if Odell Beckham Jr. did all that stuff, he'd get a penalty, right? So that was dumb. But, I like that. I like that stuff. I like when one guy talks trash and he wins. I like it. That's why I cover pro wrestling. I cover UFC. I like that stuff. So, I was happy to see it, and I was happy that it was Tyrann Mathieu on the other side a little bit more personally.
Hey, as long as you can back it up, go ahead and talk trash.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's get to Tom
back it up. If you can't back it up, then you shouldn't be able to talk. But if you can back it up,
by the way,
go ahead.
Jared, I'm never betting against Tom Brady again, and I don't know why anybody talks trash. Like, why does anybody talk trash to a guy like that? It makes zero sense. Now, one guy that could have talked trash to Tom Brady before this season was Bill Belichick. So, Jared, we got to get into this. Bill Belichick was sitting at home watching this game. He was actually sitting at home, last 6 weeks? Because he didn't make the playoffs. And he had to watch his friend Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski go at it and win a Super Bowl. So where are you at in the Belichick Tom Brady stance as far as who wins this friendship or this coach quarterback rivalry now after the 7th Super Bowl from Tom Brady?
This isn't even a question. It's Brady, and it's always been Brady, and I've been saying it's Brady. I in most cases will always side with the player because the players are the ones that are on the field and they actually decide the outcomes of the games. I understand how important the coaches are. Bill Belichick is unique. He's one of a kind. He's like Nick Saban. He's like Coach Krzyzewski, right? There's not many like him, and he's able to have been so dominant for so long in his career. And so obviously he deserves credit. But a part of the reason why he's won so many championships and why he will be a future first ballot Hall of Famer as a coach is because of Tom Brady and what Tom Brady has done for Bill Belichick, right? It used to be a partnership. It used to be a team that obviously got fractured. And now we've seen Tom Brady take a Buccaneers team that was, I would say, pretty irrelevant for the last couple of years, right? Like, especially in the NFC South, when you've got the likes of Drew Brees and the Saints and Matt Ryan and the Falcons. I mean, the Bucs weren't really doing much with Jameis Winston. No. So in a 1-year turnaround in a COVID pandemic year with basically no offseason, right? So you have a new team, new coach, no time really to implement that in a full offseason mode. And then you come out in your first year and you win a Super Bowl. The answer is simply Tom Brady. And if you disagree with that, then you can just stop watching this show because you're a fool.
Derek, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to have a different take on this. You made the comparison of that the guy, a guy in Brady's on the field doing it, so he has the better, stance here. Well, I'll argue that because I'll say, okay, well, Bill Belichick isn't hired to be a player. He's hired to be the head coach. Tom Brady is hired to be a player. Obviously, both have to work in a lot of ways for there to be a championship, for there to be 6 Super Bowls prior to this. And I think I'm going to go at it like you can go at a lot of these GOAT conversations and say it as Belichick is the best coach ever and Tom Brady is the best player ever. We really shouldn't be comparing them realistically because when Bill Belichick is given talent, when his talent actually plays, unlike they did this year, a lot of them sat at home for COVID reasons. I'm not going to blame any of them. Go ahead and do what you need. But Tom Brady was missing a lot, and he lost his quarterback, right? Like you have any head coach in the NFL lose their starting quarterback, they might struggle a bit, right? I think any coach that doesn't have a quarterback struggles a bit. Really, Jared, has there ever been a head coach that had just an awful quarterback that was able to win a Super Bowl? Not really, right? The quarterbacks were relatively serviceable or the defense was unbelievable or something like that, right? So I think they both needed each other. I think a coach always needs a player more because, like you're saying, the player plays in the field. But I'm going to go at this and just put them in 2 different categories. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady shouldn't be compared because when they're together, they won 6. Do I think Bruce Arians and Tom Brady would win 6 Super Bowls? No, I don't. And that's how I would go at it. Do I think maybe Andy Reid and Tom Brady would win 6 Super Bowls? Possibly. Yeah, and some other coaches might too. But I think Bill Belichick got the luxury of having that guy. And he was able to, year after year, even when the talent wasn't as good, he was able to draft smart. He was able to build a defense every year. I give credit to both guys, and they're the best of all time in each of their positions they were hired to be. I don't think we really should be comparing them. But 7, 6. So if I had to pick, I'm picking Tom Brady because he has the better suit. But what if Bill Belichick goes on and wins 2 more after this? Are we saying it's Bill Belichick? No, let's just put them in their own categories. I'll give the boring answer and say that they're both the best. And I think if they both were in the same position and had similar quarterbacks or Bill Belichick all of a sudden got Patrick Mahomes, we'd be like, that's the best coach of all time because he has 16 Super Bowls or something, So it's hard comparison for me. I feel like it's unfair.
Well, listen, here's why I'm picking Tom Brady. And here's why, I guess in a more of a sense, I'm blaming Bill Belichick for Tom Brady not still being in New England, right? So I guess I'm kind of switching the question of the narrative a little bit. And here's why. Bill Belichick is not only the head coach of the Patriots, he's also the GM, and he's also very much in charge of free agency and drafting players and the entire personnel of the team, right? Most coaches on a coaching staff, at least in the NFL, don't have that authority. They are strictly the head coach, and they use the players that are given to them by the general manager and the scouting department and so on and so on. Bill Belichick literally has his hand on the entire organization. So let's go back to the 2018 draft, right? When the New England Patriots decide with their first round pick to take N'Keal Harry, when the likes of DK Metcalf are sitting right there, Deebo Samuel is sitting right there, AJ Brown is sitting right there, right? And those three guys, at least DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, are balling. And we've seen N'Keal Harry. Now he's had some injuries, so it's not been all of his fault, but definitely not lived up to that first round draft pick hype. So I think the reason why I'm blaming Bill Belichick is because from an offensive standpoint, he hasn't necessarily helped Tom Brady in putting the weapons around him to succeed. Like, listen, what Tom Brady has done, especially in the playoffs with this Bucs offense, and we can go back to 2 weeks ago and the NFC Championship game against the Packers, where if you remember at the end of the first half, Tom Brady threw that deep pass to Scotty Miller with 1 second left and they scored, right? And then obviously in this Super Bowl matchup with a minute left in the half, instead of just being very conservative, running the ball, taking a knee and going to halftime, Bruce Arians and his no risk it, no biscuit mentality, they said, no, screw that. We're going to go down and we're going to try to score. And that's exactly what they did. There is no way that Tom Brady and that and that Patriots offense of 2019, 2018, and so on has the guts to, with a minute left, drive down the length of the field and try to score. They're running the ball, hoping for the best, and more than likely just taking a knee and going into halftime and basically kind of just, like giving up in a sense. So to me, Tom Brady was fed up with not having enough weapons and basically saying, I can still throw the ball deep, right? I want to open up this offense. And that's exactly what they did. Even when it doesn't connect, you mentioned it, that pass to Mike Evans that didn't connect, but it ended up in a pass interference call. What you do is you stretch the defense, and if you're lucky enough, you get a pass interference call, you flip field position, right? The Patriots were not doing that. They weren't taking enough chances. They're very conservative, very vanilla. And I think Tom Brady was saying, yeah, I may be 41, 42 at that particular time, but I can still play. And so he's basically been able to revitalize himself and show that he can still throw with his arm with his Bucs team. So I'm blaming Bill Belichick for, from an offensive standpoint, not putting enough pieces around Tom Brady to make him want to stay.
Yeah, and that's a fair thing to say, and there is some blame for Belichick in that rank. And obviously, Tom Brady proved that he did not need to be in the Patriots system to win a Super Bowl. He does it the very next year. I do think, though, if Belichick is unable to ever win a Super Bowl again, and Brady just simply already did what he did, I do think then there's the discussion of that Brady was a more valuable football piece in the grand scheme of the National Football League. But I do think if Belichick is ever to be able to get another Super Bowl, I think that's where we just go, you know what? It's a coach and it's a player. Let's stop comparing them. We can compare LeBron and Jordan and Kobe all day. We can compare, Barry Bonds and Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth all day. But when it comes to a coach and a player, I think it's a weird comparison. I don't really like it. Real quickly, before we move on to just other topics on this podcast, so the Buccaneers, obviously, they're the Super Bowl champions. So you look at them, and there's not as much to talk about going into the offseason because if they just do the same thing, they'll have a chance to win, right? They do lose, or not lose, but these are the unrestricted free agents on this team, the big ones. Chris Godwin, Leonard Fournette, Ndamukong Suh, Shaquille Barrett, and Levante David. Like
some big names.
Exactly. So, obviously still Mike Evans. Antonio Brown, is he signed for longer than 1 year?
No, he had a 1 year non-guaranteed contract. So
okay, so yeah, right now they only have one receiver in Scotty Miller or Mike Evans and Scotty Miller. You look at the running back tandem. I think Fournette was more valuable going down the stretch, and they might want to stick with Fournette rather than Ronald Jones Jr. And keep that two-headed monster. And then you look on defense.
Jones Jr. on fantasy, so no.
Jared, I personally do not care that you have, but I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
And then you look at the defense, to the captain, Levante David, Shaquille Barrett, who's a very good young linebacker, and Ndamukong Suh, an old veteran that helped stabilize the defensive line. Can they afford to lose any of these guys, Jared? Or do you think they need to focus on signing all these guys back?
I mean, obviously, of course, I think they would love to bring them all back, but
Yeah.
being realistic and the salary cap and the situations and everything, I think the two priority guys that they need to bring back, one on offense, one on defense. First, Chris Godwin, right? Because you're right. Right now, you take away Antonio Brown, you take away Chris Godwin, you are left with Mike Evans, who's obviously a number one receiver, and Scotty Miller, who is proven to be a very good slot receiver. But still, like, do we trust that Scotty Miller for an entire season is going to be the number two? Absolutely not. So Chris Godwin, especially for Tom Brady, is going to be huge. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Shaquille Barrett. I think what we saw him do with 8 quarterback pressures, a sack in this game, he's been a beast all season long. You're right, he's young. And I think he's well deserving of that second contract. When you're talking about Ndamukong Suh, I think if he wants to come back on a team-friendly deal, I'd love to have him back. But if he's going to say, hey, I'm Ndamukong Suh, I've been in MVP discussions before, at least defensive MVP discussions, just won a Super Bowl, and I want to be paid as the likes of a top defensive player, I think you say, sayonara, thanks for what you did for us this year, but we just don't have the money to pay him. If Ndamukong Suh was probably 5 or 6 years younger, I think it'd be a different discussion. But the fact that he's past the age of 30, I just think he's on the wrong side of father time, and I don't see them allocating a lot of money and resources just to bring him back. Lavonte David, he's a captain. He's played his entire career with Tampa, so I think there's a little more kind of respect and potential want to come back on both sides. I could see them potentially getting the deal done, but just to keep it simple, one player on offense, one player on defense. I think Chris Godwin is huge for the Bucs to bring back. And then on the defensive side, you got to have that edge pass rusher. Obviously, we saw what they did to Patrick Mahomes. Shaquille Barrett, needs to be a major priority.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I disagree with you on Godwin. I think they can maybe you bring Antonio Brown back on a discount, considering that Antonio Brown likely has better talent than Chris Godwin. When he's healthy of mind and healthy of body, he's arguably the best receiver in the game. So I think maybe you take a flyer on a guy like that. You try to elevate Scotty Miller, and then you can go with Mike Evans. I think the two-headed running back scenario, especially with Tom Brady, is better than the receiver. We've seen Tom Brady throw to nobody before and win Super Bowls, and Julian Edelman being his number one receiver. Julian Edelman's a great receiver, but I'd argue that Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans actually might be better receivers than Julian Edelman all in themselves. So, I think it's gonna be big. And when I look at the rest of this team, and then on defense, I agree with you completely. Shaquille Barrett's the priority. And if you can get Lavonte David to come back on kind of a more veterans-heavy contract, right, and for him to help out the team, you'd love to have your captain back, but you don't need the guy, right? You know what I'm saying? You don't need the guy that's getting older on the other side of 30. And Suh absolutely can go. It doesn't matter for me if Ndamukong Suh on that team. You can fulfill him with someone from the draft. So, I'll just let you guys know, there's a lot of 2022 expiring contracts on this team. Okay. So those are the guys that are free agents this year. Next year, it's Tom Brady. It's their center, Ryan Jensen. It's their left tackle, Donovan Smith, William Golson, Jason Pierre-Paul, O.J. Howard, Ronald Jones, all these guys, Jordan Whitehead. These are all guys that are 2022 free agents. So they really need to, think about who they want to sign. Do you sign all the guys for this year, and then you give up maybe some linemen? Or you give up, Tom Brady, potentially, or something like that, right? I think they keep Tom Brady as long as he wants until he wants to retire, realistically. But a little bit.
So
more
what you're saying is their Super Bowl window has one more year left in it. Is what you're saying?
Their Super Bowl window has as much as Tom Brady has in it, and we know that's true. And it's because they were not considered Super Bowl contenders before Tom Brady got on that team. So if they lose Tom Brady, they are no longer Super Bowl contenders, unless they get, Deshaun Watson or something like that, which I don't think is going to happen. Now, speaking of trades, quarterbacks being traded, we had a pretty big one last Saturday. Matt Stafford's the Rams quarterback, and Jared Goff apparently is the Detroit Lions quarterback. Like, what the hell? These deals can't be done until March, but this is what they're agreed upon. Like, this stuff doesn't fall apart. We've seen this in the past. Jared, your first thoughts? Just to jump quickly. Stafford, we're not going to go long on this because this is old news, but what do you think about this and all the picks that went and all that stuff? What do you think about this trade?
Great for Matt Stafford, man. I mean, he got out of Detroit, right? Like, who really wants to be in Detroit? I'm sorry, no offense, Detroit, but like,
Looking at
he's
first of all, I'll say this: the Detroit Lions were trash this year. The Red Wings are the worst hockey team in the NHL. The Pistons, although they play the Lakers really tough for some reason, they're terrible. And the Detroit Tigers have been the worst team in Major League Baseball. So it's going good. It's going good. Oh, and Michigan, they re-signed Jim Harbaugh a couple months ago.
yeah. Apparently, they just like being bad. They like being mediocre. I don't know. I mean, in all seriousness, I think this is really a win for Stafford, right? I mean, his entire career has done anything. I'm sorry. He's done everything that he can for that city and for that team. Playing injured, they were showing after the trade went through some old Matt Stafford highlights. And do you remember that play? It was from years ago. I think like 6 or 7 years ago when he basically like tore his shoulder or something, but he still stayed in. It was like a game-winning drive. It was like a 4th and 1, and he ended up staying in and throwing a touchdown pass. Like, the dude has guts, right? He can play injured, and you know that he's going to leave it all out in the line. He literally did everything he could for that team. It's just they weren't talented enough, right? And in the NFL, in the game of football, it takes more than one guy, even though that quarterback may be good or great in certain instances. So I'm happy for Stafford. He gets to go to a competitive team in the Rams who have a very good defense, and obviously they have some legitimate weapons on offense. And then you combine that with the young coaching ability of head coach Sean McVay, who's already been to a Super Bowl. So I think this Rams team could be legit. I think you should be scared in your NFC West because your NFC West was one of the best divisions already, and I think it just got that much tougher for your Cardinals to win. So that's going to be one of the most competitive divisions going into 2021 season. As for Jared Goff and the Lions, not much to say other than it sucks, I think, to be Jared Goff right now. But obviously, I think we saw as the season went on this year that the relationship with Sean McVay and Jared Goff seemed to be getting more fractured by the day. So this seemed to almost be inevitable, and it was basically who was going to offer the best package, to the Rams. So, for Jared Goff, who knows? Maybe he can. I don't want to say revitalize his career because it's not like he's a total scrub, but I think he needs to prove that he can play and be good, or he can be, a potential elite quarterback as the former #1 overall pick without having to have your head coach constantly in your ear, right? Because Sean McVay was literally in Jared Goff's ear telling him what the defense was doing up until that 15-second play clock when all communications go dead, right? So Jared Goff needs to prove that he doesn't need anyone holding his hand anymore and that he can ride a bicycle without any training wheels. Because so far, he hasn't been able to do that. So, I don't see this being necessarily a win for Detroit. I think this just was a mutual respect with Matthew Stafford that, hey, we're going to try to put you in the best situation. We want to get some draft picks back, and we're going to be in complete rebuilding mode.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, I hate this trade so much because it goes to the Rams, and it's the NFC West, and I'm sick of this. Okay, Jared, talked about this last week. Okay, I said just no Deshaun Watson to the 49ers. What did they do? Like 2 hours after our podcast gets off the air, Stafford goes to the Rams. So we have the potential, Jared, if the 49ers are somehow able to finagle a trade for Deshaun Watson, for there to be Stafford, Watson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray in the same division, and my Cardinals just suffer every single year.
Good luck.
Love it. I love it so much. No, okay, so full trade, obviously talking unbiasedly about this. The trade was 2 first-round picks in 2022 and 2023, and a 2021 third-round pick, as well as Goff for Stafford. So a lot. But, if the Rams are in the playoffs every year, those picks are going to be in the mid to high 20s, right? So not that great, but first-round talent is always great. And if you have 2 first-round picks, that's awesome. We know how good that is. And you potentially already have your quarterback, right? If Goff ends up working out, you have him, right? Like, you have your guy. I still think the Lions, just speaking of Lions first, they need to draft a quarterback in this draft.
No doubt.
Go ahead.
1,000%.
Yeah, have a competition. There's no way you can say that Jared Goff is your franchise quarterback because, yes, the guy made a Super Bowl. Like I was mentioning earlier, there's plenty of quarterbacks that have made Super Bowls. Trent Dilfer, Joe Flacco, Colin Kaepernick. A lot of these guys that you wouldn't say or are NFL Hall of Famers or superstar quarterbacks that made the Super Bowl. Jared Goff is one of those names, too, you add in there. They lost. He played bad, made some mistakes, and the Rams have sort of gotten a little bit worse every single year since they went to the Super Bowl. So, you cannot rely on that. I'm looking to see really quickly who the Lions head coach is. Have they announced the head coach?
Yeah, Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell.
The former tight ends coach for the Saints, if I'm not mistaken. And
That's right.
I don't know if he's ever been a head coach before. If he has, it was for a very short stint. But he's
interim. Yeah, he's the interim coach for the Dolphins, and his press conferences have always been insane. Very Adam Gase.
Talking about biting off kneecaps. So how that like portrays to football. If I'm a Detroit Lions fan, you just put your I don't know what you do, because I don't have a lot of hope right now. And here's what's going to happen. I'm already going to tell it right now. You mentioned that the Lions need to draft a quarterback. The Lions are going to do the only thing the Lions know how to do, and that is screw up this number 1 overall draft pick. Not the one that they've got from the Rams, but their own top 10 draft pick. And I guarantee you they won't draft a quarterback. They'll probably draft some receiver to give Jared Goff some help and pair with Kenny Golladay. But watch, they're not going to draft a quarterback for the future. They're going to miss out on a potential, superstar player. And the Lions are going to lion. That's about the best way I can put it.
I'm excited to see Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. That's all I'm going to say.
Biting kneecaps.
It goes from sunshine and Sean McVay and Los Angeles and Hollywood to just dreary Detroit with a guy that talks about kneecaps, and he's a tight ends coach, and he's big, and he's like 6'5". I did this last week for Houston Texans fans. Okay, if the Lions don't draft a quarterback, the Cavaliers, actually, excuse me, that team sucks. I'm not going to say that. There's plenty of cities that you guys can follow that are near your town. Toronto is close. Cleveland is close. Indianapolis is sort of close. Columbus Blue Jackets, not a bad hockey team. John Tortorella, great coach. So yeah, Cincinnati's kind of close, right? So you have Ohio State. You guys could just totally go the other way and start cheering for Ohio State if you're Michigan fans. I feel bad for you guys. So go on and switch. Maple Leafs have entertaining players. The Raptors are good. Browns, right? Oh, look at the Browns. Browns are up and coming. That's all I'm going to say about that. No, Detroit is whatever. Looking at the Rams, because I just don't want to talk about it, because I don't even want to speak it into existence, because I'm just getting angry talking about the Rams being good. This is great for them. They were hindered by Goff's contract, and I think when you have a guy like Stafford that clearly has better talent, you feel a lot better. And they still have Robert Woods, they still have Cooper Kupp, great tight ends, up and coming running backs that need to play better, but not bad running backs by any stance. And still, they were do you remember they were the number 1 defense in the NFL? So this team is still talented. I'm interested to see if Stafford can stay healthy and everything goes well in his personal life and stuff like this, unlike it did in Detroit. And he finally has a great coach in Sean McVay. I'm excited for great football games, and I'm excited for us to hopefully not lose to them twice. And I hope Stafford's hurt in both games we play them next year. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. Okay.
But Jared, you knew it was bad when they said there was an open competition between Goff and Wolford, right? You saw those rumors start to happen? And I'm like, guys, the only reason
if Wolford was healthy, I think he would have started. Goff would have been benched.
Jesus Christ. And here's the other thing too about Goff. Goff is he doesn't fit in the modern NFL. He's not fast. He doesn't have the ability to get out of the pocket. That's okay for the older guys because they grew up in a generation that you didn't need to run the ball. I think the modern NFL, you need a quarterback that has some sort of legs. You cannot have these guys that cannot run at all. If they're 40, it's okay, and they're superstars like Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Big Ben, sort of, and a lot of other guys, it's okay. But you need a guy with speed, and I would expect all the quarterbacks that come out of the drafts the next few years to all have some sort of speed. And when you look back at it, Jared Goff just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then when he was on Hard Knocks and sounded dumb and stuff like that, it didn't look good. It didn't look good. And so maybe he'll be humbled in Detroit. And then now we're going to hear Stafford, the LA media, talk about Kershaw and Stafford for the next 5 years, because that was what Twitter was talking about. They were excited that we're going to have to hear that Kershaw and Stafford went to the same high school and played on the same little league team, blah, blah, blah. And
good for them. That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Good for them.
Yeah, I would transition to my Dodgers, but I just started talking about Kershaw, but we need to talk about Carson Wentz because, Jared, again, we got Doug Peterson out like I predicted, right? Now Wentz.
We got Doug Peterson out.
I did. I won't throw you in this. Man lost his job, and I'm not going to throw you under the bus for it. But, Carson Wentz, there's rumors he's going to get traded. I'll wait to see it happen first, because I think these rumors are, sometimes can be a little off-putting, but it's not like Wentz asked for a trade. Did Wentz actually ask for a trade for this, or did he just?
I've only heard rumors of that. I've heard that behind the scenes he has asked for a trade, but the likes of Adam Schefter or the guys that we would really hear from, I don't know if they've officially come out and said anything. So I think that's still more of a under the radar, behind closed doors. There's obviously something where there's smoke, there's fire, but not sure if there's been an official trade request.
Yeah, but so, we have another trade request from a quarterback, Jared. Like we were talking about this last week, because we talked about Deshaun Watson a little bit. And by the way, go back and check out our discussion about Deshaun Watson. It still holds up in our last podcast. The link will be down in the description there. So, when you look at Wentz, like, where do you think a good spot for him would be? Like, do you think that teams see him as a legitimate quarterback one? Or might he be put in a position where he still potentially could be it's not like Deshaun Watson, who's a clear number one, top 5, top 10 quarterback. Wentz lost his job in Philadelphia and showed that he was a sketchy quarterback. He lost his job to Jalen Hurts, who was not even a first-round quarterback pick. So what's your thoughts on Wentz? Like, what teams should go after a guy like Wentz when there's a guy like Deshaun Watson out there?
Yeah, there's really one team that stuck out to me so far, and it's because of the history of the player and the coach, and that's the Colts, right? Obviously, the Colts are losing Phillip Rivers, who retired, and just 2 years ago, it was Andrew Luck who retired. So the Colts have had to deal with a lot of retiring quarterbacks lately and haven't really had that kind of consistency when it comes to the quarterback position. So the fact that Frank Wright has worked with Carson Wentz when he was the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia before getting this head coaching job with the Colts, I can see that as being probably the most realistic trade.
Yes.
The question is, what are the Colts willing to give up for Carson Wentz, right? Because the Eagles, even though they've said they've come out to teams and said, we are not looking to trade Carson Wentz, obviously, if they get the right deal, they would be stupid not to pull the trigger. Question is, if I'm the Colts, I'm not really trying to give much up, right? Number one, you're going to have to take on the massive $128 million contract that comes with Carson Wentz. So it's not like you're getting him on a rookie deal or like a veteran minimum deal. You're getting this guy and you are paying him $30+ million as if he is a superstar in this league. So it's like almost if you're the Colts, like you're going to want compensation in return just to take on this contract and take a quarterback who obviously has lost a lot of his confidence. And it seems like he still has tools to work with, but can you get that out of him, right? Like I think but before any team were to even, trade for Wentz, I think they want to like probably talk with him and hear from Wentz, because to my knowledge, I don't think Wentz has come out and said a word. I don't think he has. I don't think his agent has. Like, where is Wentz's mentality right now? Like, is he still all in, right, on playing football? Is football still his number one goal and number one priority? Because obviously he's gone through a lot physically and emotionally. And so where's his mindset? Where is his head? Because the last thing that anyone will want to do is, let's say you are the Colts and you end up trading for him and his head's not in the right place, right? And he's like, well, you know what? This game is no longer fun to me. It's not really about the money. I'm just not into it. And a year, 2 years down the road, he ends up saying, I'm retiring, right? So I think we need to kind of figure out where Carson Wentz's head is at first and see, does this guy still want to even play football? because he's gone through a lot. From the torn ACL a couple years ago, and then obviously Nick Foles, the backup, coming in, winning the Super Bowl. So even though Carson Wentz got a Super Bowl ring, he didn't really get them all the way home, right? That's a lot to take in for a guy. So just to go back to your original question, I would definitely say it's the Colts that I can see as the most realistic scenario. But also, I'm any team trading for Carson Wentz. I'm not giving up a whole lot. Because number one, you are taking on a massive contract for a guy who has not lived up to it. And number two, you just don't know what you're going to get for him. So if the Eagles think they're going to get a Matthew Stafford Goff trade package, I think they're out of their minds. They would be lucky to get a first-round pick. If I'm a team trading for Carson Wentz, the best pick I'm giving up is a second rounder. I'm not giving up a first because of everything that I just mentioned that you're going to have to take on.
Well, you look at like what happened with the Goff, because I would compare Goff and Wentz pretty similarly, right? Bad contracts, guys that were going to lose their jobs or did lose their jobs in their own situation. Coach relationship fell apart, it seemed like. I never thought Peterson and Wentz really ever were on the same page. For one season they were, but like I said, it seems like Peterson liked to have the kind of the control, right, of a quarterback, and Wentz is kind of an uncontrollable quarterback. And that's why I think the Colts thing you mentioned is a little surprising, because maybe he just wants a fresh start, right? Maybe he doesn't want to go back to the Eagles and all, like you know what I'm saying? So I'll throw out a couple other teams for you. Chicago Bears. Maybe throw in a swap, throw in Mitch Trubisky in a deal. Maybe just do manu a manu, right? And the Bears
just can straight up.
Well, just straight up. No, not even straight up. Oh, Wentz is coming with like a second round pick too. Like Trubisky, I believe, doesn't have a contract, right? So you trade Trubisky over there, you take on the contract to have a better quarterback. Do you think Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky? And you throw a flyer on it, and you do the same thing Detroit's doing. You take on that quarterback, and you still draft a guy, and you go one-on-one, right? And so if it works out, you have a good quarterback, right? And I think who's it? Matt Nagy is the head coach over there. Okay, offensive mind, maybe Wentz wants a fresh start, right? He can go there. Denver Broncos, right? Drew Lock might not be the guy right now. You throw Drew Lock in a trade, and you get compensation with Wentz back, and you kind of do, a similar deal to what DeAndre Hopkins got, but make it better, obviously. And you're it's not like the Stafford deal where Stafford's going in and 3 first-round picks in Goff. It's more of like Wentz in a second and Drew Lock in a third going over and something like that. But yeah, it doesn't fit as well like Deshaun Watson would or Matt Stafford would, right, Jared? Like, it's not that smooth because he lost his job. And just made a lot of mistakes this year. I would actually find this is a random one. I'm going to throw this out of the woodworks here. I think Big Ben's done. Okay, I think Big Ben's done. Steelers, go trade for Carson Wentz. Trade for Carson Wentz. You got the talent on offense, right? Yeah,
doesn't have to travel far.
And remember, Carson Wentz has had some of the worst receivers the last few years too. So there you go, little interstate trade right there. Those are my three. I do think the Colts makes the most sense. But if he does want a fresh start, maybe you go to Denver. You get a little coaching from John Elway, right? You can go to the who did I mention first? Chicago Bears. They need a better quarterback, great defense, all that stuff, and then flyer is the Steelers. I think the Steelers should do that. I don't think they will. Too much loyalty between Mike Tomlin, Big Ben in the front office, but I think Big Ben.
Those are I'm going to work backwards here, right?
Okay.
The Steelers is somewhat intriguing, not something that I initially thought. I do agree with you. I think Big Ben is done. The guy can't take a snap under center, which basically eliminates your running game because even in shotgun, the Steelers weren't running the ball, right? And listen, I don't care how great of a team you are, and we saw it last night in the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. As great as Patrick Mahomes and the weapons around him are, if you do not have a running game and the defense does not have to stop that, they can specifically single in on one aspect of your offense, which is throwing the football. You're hurting yourself. So that's the reason why Pittsburgh, went from starting out 11-0 to completely tanking, and having a horrible second half of the season was because they didn't have a running game. So I think Big Ben just needs to hang it up. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He doesn't need to prove anything else to anyone. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. just retire, my man. Like, go into broadcasting or go, I don't know, just go retire. Like, he doesn't, it hurts to watch it hurts to watch Big Ben play football because I just cringe every time that he's going to take a major hit and have another reoccurring injury. So, it would be an upgrade maybe from a health perspective. But I don't know. Like you said, fresh start, maybe in state, who knows? The Broncos, I agree that Drew Lock, I don't think he's the guy. I think they drafted him in the first round a couple of years ago, and they tried, and it just hasn't worked. But here's the thing. If I'm not mistaken, it's Vic Fangio who's the head coach in Denver, right? Yeah, he's a defensive-minded coach. So you're going to ask Carson Wentz, who has struggled offensively, who needs an offensive mind to basically come in and help get his confidence back, and you're going to take him to a head coaching scenario where it's a defensive-minded system, and it's basically like, all right, here's some random offensive coordinator, go have fun. I think there's nice weapons that Denver has with Jerry Jeudy. They've got Melvin Gordon, and they've got some playmakers. But from a coaching perspective, I don't necessarily like that matchup. And number one, the Chicago Bears, I have a legitimate question. Who's a better quarterback? And is it Mitchell Trubisky or is it Carson Wentz? Because if you're both teams, like if you're the Eagles, you're trading Carson Wentz, but are you getting back a better player or not? And vice versa with the Bears. If you're Matt Nagy and you trade away Mitchell Trubisky, are you getting back a better backup?
You're getting a good quarterback duel between Jalen Hurts and Trubisky, and he's cheap. It costs $40 million, whatever Wentz costs. That's why it would work out for the Eagles. For the Bears, yes, it doesn't make as much sense, but Matt Nagy might want a guy like Carson Wentz, has a better arm than Mitchell Trubisky. I do think Wentz is the better quarterback. That's like, I really want the Steelers one to happen, to be honest, but it just, I think it benefits both teams a little bit, but I do think more likely the Colts is the one that makes the most sense. I'm just playing a little bit devil's advocate with these. I'm coming up with other teams. So some of them might not make 100% sense. I know that's bad for a sports, a guy that's covering sports to say, but I do think a fresh start for Wentz is better than going with a guy from Philadelphia again. I just think that anything Philadelphia, he's not going to ever have a cheesesteak again. He's just never going to want any of that stuff,
It's important, man.
No, but so it's going to be interesting. We heard rumors this week, obviously, of Wentz. We heard rumors of possibly Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr swap. There's a lot of great quarterback stuff that's going to be going on. And with that, we're going to be kind of going over the next few weeks, talking about like different divisions in the NFL, and talking about the offseason and what we expect prior to free agency and prior to the NFL draft. So look forward to that. We'll get more in depth. We'll hopefully save some of the teams that maybe we mentioned here. It's for a little bit later. So Wentz does get traded and we know where he's going. We don't have to redo one, but if we have to redo one team or two teams, whatever. But yeah, so look forward to that in the future. We're going to be doing kind of analysis on every single division next week. With time permitted, we are likely to do either the AFC West, finish it off, as we did the Chiefs a little bit today, or the NFC South and finish it off the last 2 teams, or do both if we don't have anything to talk about. So that will be what to look forward to next week. Real quick, though, we don't have time on this podcast to talk about this, so we'll talk about it more when we do our MLB preview. Trevor Bauer was signed by the Dodgers, right? It was a big arms race of teams. They announced a few days ago that it was the Mets and the Dodgers at the end. Every reporter in New York said it was going to be the Mets, and the next day Bauer goes to LA. So typical New York, just talking out of their rear end and not even being right. But Bauer signed over $100 million deal. I believe it's $109 million for 3 seasons. He's getting paid $40 million in the first year, $45 million in the next year, and then $17 million last year. This is a little interesting. So essentially, this is really a 2-year deal, right? And I'll give you the scenarios really quickly. Jerry, I'll give you slight comments on this at the end, but I just want to explain the contract a bit for people that might not know. So there's the opt-out after every single year as well. So to explain it, it's essentially a 2-year deal, okay? Because he's getting paid $40 million this year. No matter what he does, he's getting a raise next year. So even if he's okay, if he's god awful, or if he's the Cy Young winner, he'll probably opt back in. The only way I see him not opting in next year is if he just doesn't like the Dodgers organization, if they don't let him do his YouTube stuff, and he doesn't get to, they just say no to everything that he wants, because he is kind of a demanding player. He talks. He's a guy that was, when the Players Association stuff was happening that we were talking about during the quarantine, he was one of the top guys discussing it, really hated the way the MLB was treating everybody. He's an outspoken player. He does not keep quiet. So maybe the Dodgers and him don't gel well. That'd be surprising, because the Dodgers kind of let everybody say whatever they want. So I think it will work. But 100%, unless he ends up being like Matt Harvey and just ends up being like the worst pitcher in the league, this is a 2-year deal. And I see him opting out no matter what after the second year, either re-signing with the Dodgers for maybe a higher, contract per year, or maybe it's all $45 million per year. Or like I said, severe injury, something like that. He takes the $17 million. But this is essentially a two-year deal. I'm a Dodgers fan. Obviously, I'm excited. I think we're the World Series contenders. I'm not going to get into that. Jared, what were your thoughts as not really a Dodgers fan, but somebody looking on the Cy Young signing with the World Series champs?
Yeah, more just the rich keep getting richer, right? And I immediately look at their depth chart, and my question that I want to go back to you, because obviously this is your team, is, Trevor Bauer, obviously Cy Young winner. What's the rotation going to be like? Because not only do you add Trevor Bauer, but you get David Price back, right? Who obviously was not there last year. So, who's your opening day starter? Who is your ace? Is it Walker Buehler, right? Who has kind of taken over that role and that baton from Clayton Kershaw? If Clayton Kershaw's still your guy, are you going to still show him loyalty and let him just continue to be the ace until he just kind of falls off the cliff completely? Does Trevor Bauer just say, hey, you brought me in here for a reason. You're paying me $45 million. I'm starting day one. I mean, it's a scenario that I think a lot of teams would like to be in. But when you're looking at that, and then you have Julio Urias, right, just kind of bringing up the rear. That's probably, if not one of the best pitching rotations that in all Major League Baseball. So who would you say, or what's the lineup as far as the starting five goes?
Before I say this, and my girlfriend's going to hate this because I'm going to show a little bit more of the apartment than she wants. Before I do this, I got to go put something on real quick. Hold on. One second.
All right.
I got to do a little switcheroo. A little switcheroo real quick. You see I'm wearing my Cardinals stuff. By the way, those two jerseys, it's Chandler Jones from the Cardinals and it's Lou Williams from my first place, Los Angeles Clippers. Just to explain that. But I had to put my Dodgers cap on. They're in first place. What are you arguing about?
That's fine. Okay. It's regular season. Championships. Okay. That's all I'm going to say.
You guys struggle with the Pistons. You guys struggle with the Pistons, who I said now are changing the Cavaliers.
Fine.
Okay. So, nonetheless, Jerry, I put this hat on was that question. Who cares who we start? Who cares who we start game 1, game 2, game 3? We have 3 potential Cy Youngs on the team now. We could even throw Julio Urias out there to start game 1. I'm okay with that. Dustin May can start game 1. David Price has never even pitched for us yet. He's a former Cy Young as well. I don't think he's winning the Cy Young this year, but you said the rich get richer. Jared, we can start anybody. Okay, Kershaw is one of the best regular season pitchers of all time. Walker Buehler is potentially the best pitcher in the league in the next few years. Trevor Bauer, similar thing. He always had the potential. A couple years, with injuries, stuff like that, it didn't work out for him, and he didn't pitch that well. He finally pitched unreal with Cincinnati last year, below 2.0 ERA. I know it was a short season, but nonetheless, it was still impressive. Any 3 of those guys could pitch well. I think you still probably go with Buehler and Kershaw as your number 1 and 2, and you have Bauer as number 3. Bauer still does have a little bit to prove. I know he won the Cy Young. I know that's crazy to say, but I'm being honest. And with these type of guys, though, you could also match up too. If Bauer matches up maybe with a certain lineup better, you make sure he pitches in that series, right? If Buehler matches up with a certain lineup better, you make sure Kershaw, right? You could do that as well. David Price. Bauer wants to pitch every 3rd day too, or every 4th day as well. He doesn't even want to do the 5-day thing. The Dodgers might have to have a 6-man rotation because they have too many good pitchers. So, I think Dave Roberts has his hand full for sure in the best way possible. I make it sounds a lot like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers, right? They throw to Evans, throw to Gronk, throw to Godwin, throw to Antonio Brown. It's an embarrassment of riches. And meanwhile, you still have Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager, and plenty of others on the offensive side. So pretty good, Jared. Pretty good. Yeah. So why
you're glowing right now is what's happening. You're glowing.
Well,
you're floating,
Jared,
actually.
Here's the thing. You know what? I thank Trevor Bauer because the Cardinals have no chance the next few years if Deshaun Watson comes. So I'm waiting for the inevitable. I'm just saying if Deshaun Watson goes to the 49ers, I might have to adopt another team this year. I might have to be like the Houston Texans and the anybody in Michigan and just switch a team for a year. And maybe be a Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer fan. Because we have no chance next year if those three. I'm just saying, unless Kyler Murray becomes Patrick Mahomes, I don't think it's going to happen. All right, I'm going off the rails. Too much coffee this morning and too much good sports talk. Super Bowl champs are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady with his 7th. Matt Stafford's on the Rams. Jared Goff is in dreary Detroit. When will Deshaun Watson get traded? Will be Derek Carr. Where will Carson Wentz go? And the Dodgers just added the best pitcher. One of the best pitchers in the major leagues. Great podcast today, Jared. Like I said, we'll be back next week talking still the NFL, either the NFC South or the AFC West or both, and we'll find another sports topic to discuss if there is. But if not, that's what you have on the docket for next week. But to end this podcast, I'm Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And you've been watching the Cover 2 podcast. See you guys next week.